The World War III on the brink. What if China and Russia built joint aircraft carriers? Beijing and Moscow are getting closer. However, it would take a lot of political willpower for such a joint project. China could partner with Russia in order to develop nuclear-powered icebreakers. While the vessels would be useful in their own right, the main benefit could be to help Beijing refine reactor technology for use in a future nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, according to the Hong Kong South China Morning Post. The Chinese Navy already possesses 2 conventionally powered flattops and is building a third. But naval expert Li Jia told the newspaper that to be truly competitive, the Chinese Navy needs a ship capable of generating lots of power and high speeds in order to launch large aircraft. China really needs a more powerful, nuclear-powered aircraft carrier to catapult its super heavy carrier-based fighter jet, the J-15, Li said. South China Morning Post reported. While China has good experience in the development of nuclear reactors for use on land, it has yet to master the miniaturization process that is needed to make a nuclear power unit suitable for an aircraft carrier. China has strong naval building capabilities, but it is still very weak in nuclear miniaturization. So it can learn from Russia, Beijing-based military expert Zhou Qinming told the newspaper. The Chinese fleet already possess nuclear-powered submarines. But the sub's reactors are poor candidates for transfer to a surface ship as large as an aircraft carrier. France learned that lesson a quarter-century ago, Zhou pointed out. In a bid to cut costs in the development of the Charles de Gaulle, France's first and only nuclear-powered carrier, its designers used 2 K-15 submarine pressurized water reactors as the main propulsion system. It did not work. The huge size of the vessel and the lack of power from the engines means it now has the unwanted title of being the world's slowest carrier, with a top speed of just 27 knots. Experts say carriers need to be able to hit at least 30 knots to create the headwinds necessary to launch their aircraft. The combat capability of the Charles de Gaulle has been sharply reduced because of its low speed, Zhou said. It was a painful lesson for the French. Enter the icebreaker project. In June 2018, the Russian government invited China's National Nuclear Corporation to bid on a nuclear-powered icebreaker project. The new, 500-feet-long icebreaker would be powered by modular reactors. Working on an icebreaker with Russia could benefit China as it eyes a possible fourth carrier that could feature nuclear power. Li told South China Morning Post that carriers and icebreakers both require large amounts of power. The structural design of an icebreaker that allows it to cut through dense ice means it needs a strong propulsion system, Li said. Russia in the past pursued a similar development path. The former Soviet Union started using icebreakers as experimental platforms for the development of nuclear reactors to power carriers in the 1950s, South China Morning Post explained. By the time it was ready to start building its first nuclear carrier, the Ulanovska, in 1988, it had already built 5 nuclear icebreakers. Unfortunately, the carrier was never completed, as the USSR collapsed in 1991, 4 years before its planned launch. Russia has the technology but no money, China has the money, but doesn't have the technology. Zhou said. By working together, China will move a step closer to one day launching a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. The Chinese Navy could possess as many as 6 aircraft carriers by the mid-2030s, experts told state media. They could be a mix of conventional and nuclear-powered vessels. 6 carriers might allow Beijing to equip each of its regional fleets with 2 flattops. One vessel could deploy while the other underwent maintenance. Song Zhongping, a military expert and TV commentator, told Global Times that China needs at least 5 aircraft carriers to execute its military strategy. Wang Yunfei, a retired Chinese Navy officer, said Beijing needs 6 flattops. The Chinese Defense Ministry declined during a November 2018 press conference to specify how many carriers it planned to acquire. Leaving aside the high cost, 6 flattops makes sense. The Chinese Navy includes 3 regional fleets, one each for China's northern, eastern and southern coasts. China has invested heavily in the development of its aircraft carriers in recent years. Its first, the Liaoning, completed a major overhaul and upgrading program in January, while its second, the homegrown Type 001A, is currently undergoing sea trials and could be ready to go into service by the end of the year. A third carrier is also in development, though like its predecessors it will not be nuclear-powered, and that, according to some, is where the problem lies. Naval expert Li Jie said that to be truly competitive on the high seas, China's military needed a ship capable of accommodating its J-15 fighters, and to do that took power, and lots of it. China really needs a more powerful, nuclear-powered aircraft carrier to catapult its super heavy carrier-based fighter jet, the J-15, he said. Although China already has nuclear submarines, the systems they use are unsuitable for carriers as they are not powerful enough. France learned that lesson 25 years ago, Beijing-based military expert Zhou Qinming said. After seeing what happened with the French carrier Charles de Gaulle, China knows not to try and transfer nuclear reactors from a submarine to an aircraft carrier, he said. Charles de Gaulle is the flagship of the French Navy, Marine Nationale. The ship is the 10th French aircraft carrier, the first French nuclear-powered surface vessel, and the only nuclear-powered carrier completed outside of the United States Navy. She is named after French statesman and General Charles de Gaulle. The ship carries a complement of Dassault Rafale M and E-2C Hawkeye aircraft, EC-725 Caracal and AS-532 Cougar helicopters for combat search and rescue, as well as modern electronics and Aster missiles. She is a CATOBAR-type carrier that uses two 75 meters C-13-3 steam catapults of a shorter version of the catapult system installed on the U.S. Nimitz-class aircraft carriers, one catapult at the bow and one across the front of the landing area. As of May 2019, Charles de Gaulle is the only non-American carrier vessel that has a catapult launch system, which has allowed for operation of F/A-18E, F Super Hornets and C-2 Greyhounds of the U.S. Navy. The carrier replaced Foch, a conventionally powered aircraft carrier, in 2001. Clemenceau and Foch were completed in 1961 and 1963 respectively. The requirement for a replacement was identified in the mid-1970s. The hull was laid down in April 1989 at the DCNS Brest Naval Shipyard. The carrier was launched in May 1994 and at 42,000 tons full load was the largest warship launched in Western Europe since HMS Ark Royal in 1950. She was to be named Richelieu in 1986 by the French president at the time, François Mitterrand, after the famous French statesman Armand-Jean du Plessis, Cardinal Richelieu. On 18 May 1987, however, the name of the ship was changed to Charles de Gaulle by the Gaullist Prime Minister at the time, Jacques Chirac. Construction quickly fell behind schedule as the project was starved of funding, which was worsened by the economic recession in the early 1990s. Total costs for the vessel would top €3 billion. Work on the ship was suspended altogether on 4 occasions, 1990, 1991, 1993, and 1995. The ship was commissioned on 18 May 2001, 5 years behind the projected deadline. In 1993, it was alleged by The Guardian that a group of engineers inspecting the vessel during her construction were British Secret Intelligence Service (MI6) operatives, believed to have been learning the method of shielding the nuclear reactors, amongst other technical details. However, the newspaper published a denial by both the British government and the Direction de la Surveillance du Territoire (DST) that there had been any incident. Charles de Gaulle entered sea trials in 1999. These identified the need to extend the flight deck to safely operate the E-2C Hawkeye. This operation sparked negative publicity, however, as the same tests had been conducted on both Foch and Clemenceau when the F-8E FN Crusader fighter had been introduced. The 5 million francs for the extension was 0.025% of the total budget for the Charles de Gaulle project. On 28 February 2000, a nuclear reactor trial triggered the combustion of additional isolation elements, producing a smoke incident. The ship left Toulon for her 14th and final sea trial on 24 October 2000. During the night of 9 to 10 November, in the western Atlantic while en route toward Norfolk, Virginia, the port propeller broke, and the ship had to return to Toulon to have a replacement fitted. The investigations that followed showed similar structural faults in the other propeller and in the spare propellers, bubbles in the one-piece copper-aluminium alloy propellers near the center. Although the supplier, Atlantic Industry, was not believed to have intentionally been at fault, it was nevertheless blamed for poor quality construction. A few hours after the French defense minister ordered an investigation on quality management, a fire destroyed the archives of the supplier. As a temporary solution, the less advanced spare propellers of Clemenceau and Foch were used, limiting the maximum speed to 24 knots (44 km per hour) instead of the contractual 27 knots (50 km per hour).